Hello, my name is Gabriel Wallace, and I'm a third year currently taking FMP180 Principles of Production Technology. Have you ever wondered how production technology is changing in the film industry? Well, look no further than your pocket. As smartphone cameras such as Apple's iPhones continually close the gap between DSLR cameras and seemingly provide an all-inclusive interface for shooting, editing, and uploading in one device, the sometimes exorbitant cost of the alternatives seem less and less appealing to the masses, especially small-budget productions. Now, some people would argue that smartphone cameras can never replace a DSLR camera, but do the cons really outweigh the pros? Let's go back to the start. Okay, so Steve Jobs and Apple released the first-generation iPhone in mid-2007, and although it may not be considered the first smartphone, it definitely set the standard and revolutionized the smartphone by including a large 3.5-inch multi-touch screen and a 2-megapixel rear camera. Pretty impressive for the time. Nowadays, the iPhone 14 Pro has worked its way up to 48 megapixels and is capable of capturing 4K, 60 frames per second video, and 10-bit HDR. The phone has 3 lenses, 24mm for wide, 77mm for telephoto, and a 13mm ultra-wide. I might mention that those last 2 lenses both have a 12-megapixel sensor. Okay, so what's the downside and how does it compare to the DSLR camera? The physical size of the iPhone sensor and lens is so much smaller than a full-size DSLR camera, so this basically means that iPhones in general are still inferior to DSLR cameras in dynamic range and low light settings. Not to mention how megapixels don't play an incredibly huge role unless you're cropping your images or you want to print the image in a larger size. The iPhone 14 Pro also lacks an optical zoom as well as basic camera settings such as white balance. Because the iPhone is so compact, these processes such as full stops, adjusting the aperture, just aren't possible. And Apple's solution? Make it a digital or automated process. You can set or simulate f-stops from 1.4 to 16 using a digital effect. Now you may be asking yourself, what are the benefits? Well, here's a big one. The iPhone's extremely compact size allows it to be easily portable, giving you more options at different shooting locations. You don't need to bring a bag packed with different lenses and heavy equipment. This small size also allows you to get fluid movement shots easier. iPhones are really fast to get up and running. It takes a mere second to launch the camera app opposed to a DSLR camera setting. As previously mentioned, a smartphone can act as an all-in-one device. You can use apps like iMovie to edit and then immediately upload to your favorite streaming service or platform such as YouTube or Vimeo directly from your phone. Lastly, for the most part, you can't tell the difference between a DSLR camera and a modern iPhone unless you're extremely examining each pixel. Take a look at this clip from Jared Polin.
All right, now let's move into the studio. It's a pretty simple setup. We just set some continuous Kino flow lights up. We had a tripod set for the Nikon and the Sony, and then I handheld the iPhone one so that I could get the same composition, and we did it pretty well. So this one right here is the Nikon Z9. We can zoom in. Nice and sharp, really nice colors, nice tones, nice background blur. And I just noticed I must have accidentally turned the ring a little bit, so we're at 22.5 here. But look, the difference between 22.5 and 24 is not much when we go to the Sony. Sony looks just as good when you go in here. Honestly, I think the Nikon colors and sharpness look much better, but we always knew that was the case anyway, locked off here in the studio. So that looks good. Again, remember the Nikon sign out of focus in the background. And then we get to the iPhone. Remember, the aspect ratio is a little different, so we're gonna get a little more wider and a little more taller here, but in the background, not as much bokeh, it's more prevalent, but I will say that the skin tone and the colors and the sharpness looks really good. I mean, looking in on the eye, zoomed in 1:1, this looks really nice. And if you weren't, again, looking at the Sony and looking at the Nikon and you just put these all side by side, they would look pretty uniform and pretty good. So again, with the main camera using 48 megapixels, I think that the iPhone has done a very good job so far.
Could you make out the differences? Were they huge? It was a struggle for me to see any major difference. One thing that's certainly changing in the industry is the stigma behind using iPhones for a production, as we can see in the award-winning indie film Tangerine by Sean Baker, which use iPhone 5Ss. Here, take a quick look.
Ռազմիկ։
Դու ես մեզ ասես ինչ անի։ Արե սերը խմուրես պրեստու դու բարձը չեք գժվերա։
Մաման չես կանչել այստեղ Քրիսմաս օրը ինչ։
Կանչել եմ որ ասեմ մարդը շունա, շուն։
Այդ ինչ որ բան է կատարում, ես չեմ հասկանում։
Կարկուես ես ոչինչ չգիտեմ, հա, ես շատ լավ եմ նայում ձեր account-ները։ Ամեն գիշեր նա փող է քաշում։ Էդ ում վրա է ծախսում։ Սրանց վրա։ Արա ամոթա խայտարակ։
Personally, I think the evolution of smartphone cameras is an incredible development that will open the world of film to everyone, making the story's script the more pressing battleground. If you're interested in this topic, you may want to take a look at some of these videos. Thank you.